Well, you could see I'm outside with the truck. I don't know if that's good. I got some bad news. I was getting an inspection the other day, and we can see some parts here on the floor. Brake pads and rotors. Brake pads and rotors. We need pads and rotors all the way around. That kind of sucks, kids. Got a wheel. And here's what I'm looking at. This is left front. And of course I'll probably cut this off and try to splice a bunch of pieces together. But what really sucks about this is I got to do the rotors. So I have to take the caliper off, which is just this guy. And that's these bolts. These two bolts. I'm going to take that caliper off. And then I have to take the caliper mounting bracket, which are those two honking bolts back there. And this ain't the graviest piece of lovely little job here, sitting and kneeling on the floor. And I'll put new rotors in. Might have to beat those off with a hammer. Who knows? Who knows what's going to go on there and what's going to happen? But we'll come back later after I get this at least a little bit apart and go from there. Well, you guys, you can see I got the caliper off, and I'm not going to flip this around. I have it precariously sitting up there, but there's some boots. I should have had a flashlight up there. There's some boots around these pistons in this caliper that I wanted to make sure weren't torn or damaged. I'm sure I'll get a better picture of that here later when I get everything all cleaned up and ready to slap together. But you can see here, this outside pad has a tremendous amount. There's the little wear looking gap in there, how you can sort of gauge it. There's a lot of life left on that outside pad, but that inboard pad is almost metal on metal. And what we'll do is we'll try and see if I can throw my glovage back on here and muscle through some of the pains of that. So I did take the caliper off with these bolts, and I did remove these bolts here that are going to take off this whole caliper mounting bracket. And it will probably need some convincing. That inside pad, my swinging lens cap there, that inside pad is almost non-existent. And I'm going to have to really whack that out of there. But that outside pad's non-existent. Let's see if the rotor comes off easy. I'm going to set the camera for this and use two hands. Let's fight me here. All that rust. Why? Because of where we freaking live. And that undoubtedly is the failure on the inside of this rotor. So the rest that I was fighting was really just the mounting of the rotor. You can see the rust here on the face of this. That is from all the slop and the shit and the salt getting up and chewing on the inside of those pads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and do a little bit of cleanup here, start throwing some parts together, and we'll see this thing going together in a minute. Well, you can see I got the brake pads out of there. Took a little bit of convincing how to get a hammer out and really whack them up. Probably because there's some rust and some swelling under this brake hardware. So I'll have to pop those up, clean up this bracket a little bit with a wire brush and maybe even a file if it's really scaly. So getting a better look at that brake pad and that rotor. You can see that rotor, and there's nothing to that pad. That brake pad should be that thick, and it is not. So that's what we're fighting. I got to clean that up. There's my caliper mounting bracket bolts. I could see that somebody's already taken this apart once. There's some anti-seize on there. I'm going to clean it up and freshen that up. And my caliper bolts, a little bit more light. The gold anodizing looking flavor up there is okay, but I'm going to clean up where little booty boot goes and clean up those threads just a little bit before I put it together. Okay, that's a lot. I forgot about this. Let's go look at these parts. So in my goodie bag here, I opened up the disc brakes, and I do have 4 new pieces of hardware there, so that's good. I don't have to run to the store and get more hardware. And then my individual pads here, these are ceramic, I guess. You can see the new ones. Real nice shape, obviously. But in order to get that loopy there to slide up over, we're going to take and put those new pieces of hardware on there after cleaning it up. So that's what I'm doing next. I should have snapped some pictures through this. I cleaned this one up. I use a file and a wire brush on that. See that edge? I didn't clean this end up yet. See all that scale and nasty shit? I'm not focused well, this camera in this light, I guess, but so I'm going to clean that up and we're going to start throwing it together. It's taken me a long time here because I'm playing with the camera and stopping and starting. But this side's going to go together, and I've got this big pair of channel locks. I'm going to use that and the old brake pad to push that piston back in on that caliper. There's actually a dual piston caliper going real slow. But anyways, that's another time. I don't know that I'm going to show that. The angle's not great, but I'm dealing with cars and outside and things like that. That's the way it always is, right? So I just took this rotor out of the box, and there's a possibility of some oils and things on there so that prevent this from rusting. So you always got to use some brake cleaner and spray this down. So what I'm going to do is flip this, since it's raised. I'm going to clean this inboard piece, and then you see I put a big thumbprint there. Then I'll touch everything by the edge so I don't put any more oils onto that, so we don't want the oils to get into the pads. My smoker back here is not plugged in. This is I don't think this is the flammable kind, but we still don't want to risk it. There's flammable and non-flammable brake cleaner. We're just going to go with that. Spray it down. Clean up, clean off any of those oils. You can see there's the little tiny fine pieces of metal when they sanded that, put that cross hatch on there, and then also some of the oils. Most of this will evaporate off, but I want to put a wipe on there to get that edge clean. Yeah, I did that wrong, didn't I? I should have cleaned this side first. I'll flip it back over and do it again real quick. And my brake cleaner wants to be bugger. So using a fresh rag, I'll just use this for my hands for the rest of the time when I'm not wearing my gloves. Don't need to clean the face of that, but I just want to get that liquid brake cleaner off of there. So getting all that oil off of there. Do the same, I'll hit this again. We're going to put it all together and we'll show the finished product right after that. I wanted to show this is very important. Got to get that oil. Some of the older ones used to have like a waxy coating, like a Cosmoline or something like that, but today it's just a light coating of oil, and we're going to go take care of that right now. So through the magic of turning on and off the camera, I struggled. Usually I compress. I was talking about this caliper pistons with this. This is a little bit of a larger caliper. I don't know if the caliper's shot yet or not. And believe it or not, never had a large C-clamp. So I had to run to the store and get a C-clamp today. So what we're going to try and do is compress that piston. And what I might have to do is some editing here, but we'll see if I can't get that to work. Just turning it around. I will use the old brake pad to try to evenly push that down. Yeah, this is short short throw on that brake hose. So this is going to give me some mechanical advantage to try and push those pistons in slowly. And like I said, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this or if that caliper is going to be shot. Those pistons could be bad. It is going, and I want to do this slowly because I'm actually pushing fluid back up through the master cylinder. And I might not be doing this evenly enough, so I'm going to reposition this. I can see I'm pushing the one piston down, but not the other. I want to put more in the center. And that very well is going. There it goes. They're both going. So running out and buying the C-clamp was a wise choice. And slowly turning that piston, slowly pushing those pistons back in. I'll end up cleaning up this rotor just a little bit. You can see I didn't put the mounting bracket on there yet. I wanted to get this piston pushed in first. So at least one out of my 4 calipers probably are good. I'll be able to tell more later when I take it for a test drive. So running out and just getting those pistons to push down just to get them to get started. Of course I'll be checking for leaks as time goes on. But I use that old pad to push those down in, and it looks very successful. So that's probably the end. I'll probably cut that there. Get rid of some of that. Not that it matters. That doesn't touch anything. It's not a machine surface to ride on anything. So that's where I'm at. We'll be back. I'm going to show a real quick video buttoning this whole guy up in a minute. Hey everybody, we're back. So what we've got, and I didn't really cover this earlier, but I've got my jack that's maintaining, basically holding up the front of the truck here with that under the control arm, but I do have some safety precautions going there. I've got a jack stand behind the frame there just in case anything funny's happening. Wanted to point out my absolute handiwork here, right? I did have to take the time out to go to the store, but I've got my new rotor on there. Floating rotor, nice and free. Got my new brake pads in, and all my bolts are tight. I tightened my 2 caliper frame bolts. I'm sorry, my caliper mounting frame bolts are right there, kind of hidden. And then my 2 caliper pins. Lubed them all up, gave them a good hit them with the wire wheel, and cleaned them up. I guess I didn't show a picture of that, but I cleaned those up. That's the little touches you're not going to get with a normal backyard brake job. These pins completely cleaned, rust-free, grime-free, re-lubricated before I put them back into the caliper slide. A lot of people, they're just going to not even worry about that rotor, just slap those pads in and think they're going to get away with it for $45 and go down the road. So what I basically did was I put on, this rotor was 50 bucks. The pair of pads was 46 for the 2. So that's going to last me, that rotor's going to last me a few years. I might actually eventually change the rotors before I change the pads again due to all the salt that we have. But the taking the time, cleaning those pins up, making sure that you're not hammering your pads onto the slides, making sure that your component under your steel, your iron under those steel spring clips is free so that your brake pads actually move and slide. I'll try that. You can't really see it a lot, but you can see that caliper can actually slide if I'm moving it. And it has to float on those pins for the brakes to come on and off and to work. So probably should have had a camera in doing this and help me, but you know, it's kind of tough getting in there. But brake jobs are easy if you take the time to learn it and do it right. I'm probably going to go ahead and do the other front. I'm only going to put a report up if I find something that's really shitty. But and then we'll go maybe do a little bit more in the back. But we're going to do the other side. I bet it's worse. I bet I'll give a quick little update. Maybe I'll throw that in the middle. See how that works. Be and do. Get out and do. I can't mention that enough. If you want to save some money on some things, you got to just get in there and do it. And if you can't, I mean, it's tough. You have to tow a car away or something sometimes. That's part of it. But if I could get away with this brake job, I'll put some totals in there. My parts total, yeah, we'll talk about that later. Cheers. Peace. Almost beer time if I get that other wheel done. Okay, so this is a little bit of bad news for side 2. The pads, I don't know where they are. Over there. The pads aren't bad, but that rotor was death. I don't know if it's because the rotor is just all shitty and chewed up. That's the inboard side. Or if the caliper wasn't moving properly. I did have trouble taking the caliper off. You can see just looking at the outside face, it looks pretty happy. Inboard, all that busted up and chewed up, rusty metal, that's bad juju. The pads on this side, hardly worn at all. I'm thinking caliper action was moving much less. Starting to get some shadows with the sun there. I was able to clean up my caliper mounting bracket and get the new pads on there without too much trouble at all. Got my new rotor up there, it's happy slappy. A lot of rusty, nasty shit up in here. And I had some trouble taking this caliper off of the mounting bracket with the old pads on. I had to pry it up out. So I think I did that damage to that piston on the way out. But this, in my opinion, this caliper was questionable anyway. So with that extra damage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to button this up. I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to put my caliper mounting bracket back on. I'm going to put my new shoes in there, my new brake pads in there, and I'm going to put the wheel back on. But I'm going to have my mechanic change this caliper. And I only want to do that because you see how nasty and rusty that caliper hose, this hydraulic brake hose here might get, quite frankly, just broken. It's sort of rusty and nasty. I don't want to deal with that. That is another purchasable part. It runs up through there and then runs up and runs into that block. So anything that's going to deal with that brake line, if it's a stranded vehicle on my property that absolutely needs fixed, I think I'll do it. But if it's something that's going to incapacitate one of my running vehicles like this, that hose, that nasty, rusty, nasty mess, I'm going to let my mechanic do that work. So that's the deal. Unfortunately, it's going to cause the cost of this job to go up a little bit. But, you know, that's why I work, right? Pay for things that I can't afford, you know? But you need a vehicle, so it's one of those things. You always got to put in your budget for the maintenance issues. Just wanted to throw that in there. It's unfortunate that I'm going to have to do a little bit of extra mechanical work, pay somebody to do it that I'm not capable of doing. I shouldn't say that I'm not capable of, that I do not wish to take on at this point in time. They do that for a living. It certainly doesn't hurt to help throw my mechanic a bone or two either. So we'll give it to him without it being too difficult. And I want to start wrapping this side up and then maybe move on to the back. So I'm going to give you a little lowdown here. I'm sitting in my cab of my pickup that we just put the front brakes on. And if I put the key in and started it and put it in gear and went in reverse to drive away, and when I went to stop, this pedal would go straight to the floor and I would panic. I wouldn't have any brakes. I wouldn't know what to do. I'd start pumping the brakes like crazy, which is what we don't want to do. We don't want to cause any frothing or any playing games with any of the hydraulic fluid in the system. That's not good. And we want to set those brakes properly. So what I'm going to do without the engine running, I'm just going to slowly push this pedal down. Not all the way. I don't want to go to the floor because I don't want to run the master cylinder piston to the end of its travel. It never goes there, and I certainly don't want it to stick there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly press it and slowly lift the pedal. And then I'm going to wait a few seconds, and then I'm going to slowly press it down again, and I'm going to do this until the pedal firms up. So that's what I'm going to do, and that's to get the brake, because the brakes now, remember I pushed those pistons and those calipers all the way in, and now we're going to re-push those pistons out so that it sets the pads onto the rotor. So that's what we're going to do. That's it. I'm going to go there. That damn air compressor, slowly pushing that pedal down. I'm not going any further than that. I'm going to hold it there for a second. I wonder if I close the door it'll help. A little bit. I'll slowly lift that foot up. Slowly up. And there it is. So that is resting now for a minute. It's probably, these are brand new rotors, really thick pads. It's only going to take a couple cycles here. Slowly push it down. I'm still not meeting resistance yet. This is a step also that a lot of amateurs forget. Backyard boneheads, or whatever you want to call them. Starting to slowly lift that pedal up now. And there you go. I'm not going to put this, I am going to put this in the, I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap up as a final steps before you test drive it. There it is. Look, I met resistance. So now I'm going to push down a little harder. Those have hit. Those pads now are up against the rotor. And now I'm going to apply the brakes. So now there's no doubt that those are set right up against where they need to be. So now what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to video this, before I even attempt to put the rear ones on, I could put the rear on at the same time, but I want to just go take this thing for a spin, because I have to back the car out, turn it around just for the room in my garage to get me nice light and positioning. But you want to drive and season your brakes a little bit, especially since it's new pads and rotors. We don't want to cause hot spots. We don't want to cause glazing. Panic stops are probably the worst thing you could do right now. If you have to, it's unpreventable, but you really don't want to do any panic stops for the first 25, 50 miles. Even any hard, abrupt stops. You want to sort of drive way more grandma-ish. But what I'm going to do is I have a 2-mile stretch of road. I'm going to drive down it, and I'm going to go from about 25 miles an hour down to about 5. Nice gradual deceleration. It won't take long to get back up to 25. I'm going to do that a couple times. Then I'm going to go to 40 and have a couple nice gradual stops. And then I'm going to do that 40 miles an hour stops. I'm probably going to do about 4 of those. And then I'll be able to pull in and drive in. And then I'll say that my front brakes will be mostly seasoned. I'm still going to try to do no panic stops and no towing, no none of that stuff for at least 50, 100 miles. Then I'll redo the same thing. I'll do another test drive and reseat the back. Plus, this tells me if I'm having problems with my brakes, I don't know which ones are acting up if I just changed all 4. If I get some funny business, I know it's at least one of the 2 front, and then maybe even by the sounds and the way the vehicle feels, I will know. A lot of times, even your guys in the brake shops, they're just going to go crazy. They're going to put all 4 on, do it. I want to just know. I want to get in there since my fingers were in there, and I want to know and do it myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to go take a test drive, and we'll be back with you guys. Maybe we'll even start a beer when we start tearing into those rears. We'll see. It's coming. Talk to you guys. Peace. All right, look at that. We're looking at the left rear rotor on the truck. That left rear, it's pretty shitty. Inboard is just all rusted to shit. There's sort of a drummy drum there. That's for the e-brake. Looking at the outboard, you've got a little bit of exterior rust there, but not really so bad. Inside, not good. finished product. Got the new rotor on. New pads in there, of course. I had to reuse the old hardware, the hardware that came with the new stuff. You see how there's a little bit of an extended tab there? The inside of the caliper mounting bracket is wider than the outside. So I have the new hardwares for two small widths. This has a wide and a narrow, so I had to use the old hardware over. The caliper bolts can't really get a socket in there because of the way the caliper is. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a good shot at that, but it's too tight. You got to really use an open-end wrench, and that really sucks on this old rusty shit. And then these guys down in here, the caliper bracket bolts, what a mother effer that was. Those were rusted through from all the salt. You see the sky. I'm going to try and point to it. The sky down here on the inside of where that bearing is, it's open, and it must have rusted the end of that bolt. These were an absolute bear to get out. Hurt my hands using the breaker bar. If this was up on a rack, if I had the money, you know, up in the air, would have been a little bit easier. I'd have had the good leverage on it, but I don't, sitting down here on my knees on the ground. Anyway, left rear's done. On to the other side. Here's another little piece of info I didn't talk about. If you look at those studs, you can see that I put some silver compound on there. There's like the regular rusty stud, and on the edges I put this little silvery stuff. That is called anti-seize. Anti-seize lubricant. So that's going to get in between the two metals. It's like grease. It's like a grease that kind of doesn't go away. This has like a little bit of lead in it or something in there that is going to help prevent those from seizing or rusting together. Anytime we're in this salty environment, I anti-seize the living shit out of everything. My mechanics and anybody else has to change tires for me hates it, but I don't care. It's that silvery stuff that it gets on you and it gets everywhere, but that's all part of it. Anti-seize the living shit out of your lug nuts, kids. Well, here's the right rear side, taken apart. There's the emergency brake drum brake that goes on the inside of that. Pulled my caliper off. Same deal as the front. Got a caliper mounting bracket. I took the hardware out. I'm going to clean them up. Got to beat up all that rust and clean the rust up out of that nooks and crannies, because those things rusting up prevents those brake pads from sliding. Inboard pad beat to death. Almost nothing left. Outboard pad's got a ton left. Typical for the area. Inside of the rotor, rusted, pitted, galled, shitty. Outside, pretty fair. Fair enough anyway. A little yucky, but not pitted and galled like that inboard pad. We'll put them back together. Simple, easy peasy. You can see a lot of that splatter shield there. Beat to death. Rust shithole. I don't know if they're going to fail me for that for inspection or not. I don't know why, because the rotor's pretty much out in the open anyway, so it mattered when you have drum brakes like that, like the emergency piece, but that's sort of intact there. So here we go.